Good evening, everyone. Great to have you back on another episode of Reid Between the Lines. With the passing of Montreal great Jean Béliveau this week on our Four Down segment, we're joined by the voice of the Montreal Canadiens, Michel Lacroix, as we dissect Jean Béliveau, his career and the impact he's had on the Montreal community, and we also talk about the current state of the Habs. On our Pretender Contender segment, Michel stays with us as we discuss Jean Pascal and the controversial ending fight that happened at the Bell Centre in Montreal and between him and Roberto Bollanti. And last but not least, I face off against Canadian sports broadcaster Richard Gardner in my face-off segment. It's happening right here, right now. It's time to read between the lines. The Montreal Canadiens lost one of its greats with the announcement of the passing of longtime captain Jean Béliveau. On this week's, we dedicate our Four Down segment to number 4, Le Gros Bill. As always, we invite you to share your opinions, have your say on our social networks at facebook.com/RBTL Sports, as well as on Twitter at RBTL Sports. We welcome to the show the voice of the Montreal Canadiens. That's Michel Lacroix. Great to have you.
Nice to be with you.
You called your first game in 1977. Fast forward 37 years. Here you are right now on the set of Reid Between the Lines. Great to have you.
Same here. Pleasure to meet.
To your right is Anthony Cornelli, RBTL contributor. Great to see you.
Great to be back.
And last but not least, co-host David Hurley. All right, gentlemen, start with you, Michel. Safe to say, we already know that Jean Béliveau, I think most would agree, is the greatest captain of all time, or at least of the Montreal Canadiens. Can we throw the question out, or I'll throw it to you? Is he the greatest captain that the National Hockey League has ever seen with one organization?
To be honest with you, I think I'd say yes, because what he's done on the ice is one thing, but off the ice is also something very special. I think we should go back when we select a captain to not only the athlete, but also to the man who means so much to a community.
So do you believe the criteria has changed in today's NHL in terms of
definitely,
leadership?
Yeah.
Right.
But the NHL has changed. Let's not forget that when we're going back to the 60s, I mean, players were involved with the team, with the same team for many, many years,
Right. Yeah.
and that is not the case today. So we do have to set, I'd say, different standards. But personally, I think that even though we had great captains, from Butch Bouchard, that we named the captain of captains, to Jean Béliveau, the greatest ambassador of all ambassadors, but I think that the way I see Mr. Béliveau as a man, as a hockey player, I think that he is on top of all the captains in the NHL.
Well, if you look at statistically, and today it's all about stats, Marc Messier has just as good stats as Jean Béliveau does. Sure. He might not have the 10 Stanley Cups. He has 5. He led Edmonton Oilers to 4 Stanley Cups.
Second all-time as well.
One without Wayne Gretzky, which was the big one in 1990. And then he went to New York and won their first Stanley Cup after 40 or 50 years.
But I don't think you can disagree, though, and I tend to agree with you, Michel. You can't argue the contribution that Jean Béliveau has made to the organization and to the community. And when you pass, and they're talking more about who you are as a person than the actual player, I mean, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, and you got to look at the NHL legends. You know, you hear of Gordie Howe, you hear of Wayne Gretzky, and the way that people have been saying the nicest things about Jean Béliveau, it's unbelievable. I mean, the guy's done so much off the ice as much as he's done on the ice.
I haven't heard one bad comment.
Absolutely not. And I mean, you look at the Montreal community, the way it stood up and said thank you to a great man, and said, you know, a guy who had time to answer every letter that people wrote to him. That says something about your character, your personality, and that's why he's been such a great ambassador and a great captain.
If you were to choose an ambassador in today's NHL that does represent some of those values of Jean Béliveau, is there one that stands out in terms of franchise player? You mentioned it before, a lot of these guys don't stay with the same organization. But if you had to make a choice, I'd be curious to know who you'd pick right now.
I'd probably go with a guy like Martin Brodeur, or a guy like Ray Bourque at the time, or somebody who stayed with the same organization for years. I don't know anyone who's leading.
I will go with a guy who just retired this year, who you had the pleasure of saying his number and his name quite a bit, in number 11, Saku Koivu. I mean, that guy was just as good, if not.
If we go sheer longevity, he
was
deserves
right up
the spot
there.
right up
Absolutely.
there, right? He is the
was a
longer
great
tenured
for
captain of all time for the Habs. So
I think what's important here when we speak about Jean Béliveau is not, a lot of people don't speak just about his hockey. We speak about what he did off the ice. Like you mentioned, he was a great ambassador. He did great charity work when he was done his career. He worked a lot with kids. So it's very, very nice to see that people are remembering him as a man first, than just a hockey player, a great hockey player.
You know, it didn't surprise me, but when you look at the reaction of his former teammates, Yvan Cournoyer, Dickie Moore, Gilles Tremblay spoke, because Gilles and I worked together very closely when I first started with the team. And they were always talking about Jean Béliveau as a captain. Whatever they needed, they'd turn, they'd talk to Jean. He would listen, give them their advice, and it goes from Doug Harvey to all of them. And Yvan Cournoyer was also deeply touched by the passing of Mr. Béliveau.
I want to change topics a little bit and change gears and bring it to the present with the Montreal Canadiens, who are going through a tough spell. Stay right there, don't go anywhere. I want to talk about the Habs. They've only won one game in their last 7, 3 games in their last 10. We're talking Habs right after the break. Stay with us. Safe to say the Montreal Canadiens are going through a tough spell, and on this week we continue our 4 Down segment by talking about the Habs. And is it time for us to push the panic button when it comes to Montreal Canadiens? Every team goes through a tough spell. Seems like we're going through it right now. What are one of the biggest changes you bring to the team right now to get this team going?
I mean, as I've been a big proponent of the whole season, it's David Desharnais got to leave from that first line. Go to the third line. Give an opportunity either to Plekanec or Galchenyuk to play center. I'd love to see Galchenyuk on that first line with Pacioretty and Parenteau and see what kind of damage they could do.
Sure.
You know, it's a long season. It's a long season. I won't go against my coaching staff or anything, but it is indeed a long season. And one thing that I must tell you, gentlemen, from the last games played at the Bell Center, there is less and less space on the ice. Guys are big, they're strong, they're fast. Physically, they're in top shape. So, and very often it's pure luck that will definitely change the entire game.
Yeah.
If we do have an injury right and left, we must consider this. And I think that our coaching staff is well aware of the situation. They're looking for a solution, especially to get our team going in the first period, and from then on.
Because, I mean, like you've been saying, getting the team going in the first period is really a big problem.
Yeah.
The Habs are 9-0 when they score first. So let's get started in the first period. For some reason, this season they're having a hard time getting started fast and getting that first goal.
You make a great point, Dave. The Habs are 9-0 when they score first, but they've only scored first in 9 out of 29 games this year.
Yeah.
And what you said is that the NHL today is bigger, faster, stronger. If you're playing from behind, today's game, chances are you're going to be struggling, you're going to trail, you're not going to win those games.
And we take a look at parity in the NHL too, especially this season in the Eastern Conference. You look at Tampa Bay, you look at the Islanders, you look at some surprises who've come up. There are no more gimmies.
Oh, we're not even.
There are no more games where you can steamroll in.
Every team's
the
a big
visiting
team.
team shows up, you pummel on them, you move on to your next game and say, well, there's a win for it. You don't get that anymore.
We saw it with Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo was at the bottom of the league, and all of a sudden we lose 2 in a row to Buffalo, and we're not even double-digit lead from last place in the East. Let's take that into consideration. You lose a couple more, and you slide down that chart real fast in the East. The parity's right there.
I will agree, though, that from a internal look, you look at 24CH and you get a glimpse of the inside of the locker room. This is a tight-knit team, Michel. You get a chance to cross these guys all the time. On a scale from 1 to 10, how united is this team? Is there anything in terms of, is it fragmented, or is it really a unified team who believe in what the coach...
I think it is. I think it's a unified team. They're probably looking for a solution. Well, I'll try to do something. They all think that they can be the key, or they can find a solution. But the coaching staff is working really, really hard, from JJ to Dan to Michel Therrien to Clement. They're trying to figure out exactly a way out of this, because obviously no one wants to lose 2, 3, 4 games
especially
in a
not
row.
in the city. The fans don't allow that to happen.
And we know all too well that our fans are scrutinizing all the results, all the statistics. We want to improve the
like
the
they
team.
say in Montreal, there's trop de gérants d'estrade.
I don't want to be Captain Obvious, but let's just touch on the basics. The Canadiens ranked 29th on the power play in the NHL. And Montreal's done well on the power play in the last few years, and that's took us into the Eastern Conference Final, etc. We're getting outshot in almost every game this season. And simple hockey rules: put the puck on the net, things happen. So I don't want to push the panic button, but maybe the reality button.
Yeah, you definitely develop bad habits, and that's what these early games are for. I agree with you, it's a long season, but there are habits that get developed, and they do carry over into the playoffs. And you want to be careful of that and mindful of that. And I think that it's great to know, you obviously see the coaching staff and how hard they've been working, but this is going to be more than an individual person trying to fix the problem. You're going to need the whole team to be able to do that.
Yeah, and see the additions that they've made on defense. They've added close to 2,000 games in 2 players in Brian Allen and Sergei Gonchar. The problem is with those 2,000 games comes the mileage, and you're starting to see it a little bit of wear and tear on that defense. They don't have the same speed, and we're getting burned a little bit. Teams got to play a little bit more together, a little better team defense, and see how they can improve by that.
Stay right there, gentlemen. I want to talk a little bit of boxing with you, especially. I know you did a little bit of ring announcing back in the day. We'll find out about that as our Pretender and Contender segment is up next. Don't go anywhere.
I'm not a dirty fighter. I've never done that in my life. So, like I said, that was just an accident.
That was Jean-Pascal talking about how he's not a dirty fighter at a press conference at the end of a very controversial fight that happened in Montreal at the Bell Center as we saw Jean-Pascal face off against Roberto Belanti. I'm curious to find out your opinion. We want to hear from you on our social networks at facebook.com/RBTL Sports, as well as on Twitter at RBTL Sports. We welcome back Michel Lacroix, voice of the Montreal Canadiens, and also a boxing fan too. You had a chance of calling a big fight.
We're going way back. I was the ring announcer for the first bout between
Hilton and Ouellette.
Hilton and Ouellette, the one that ended with, what was it, 8 seconds to go in the
knockout in the 12th
the
round?
final knockout. Yep, I was there with a little bit of blood on my tuxedo shirt.
Good,
That was neat. That was nice.
Hopefully get your input as well. To your right is Pierre Just you were front line, right there, front seat with regards to the event you were covering for RBTL Sports.
Yep.
Great to see you. I'm looking forward to your
here.
insight. And to my left is RBTL contributor and co-host David Hurley. All right. There's no denying that anybody in their right mind who knows boxing knows that Belanti put a little bit on there. All right, and that's to say the least. From what you've seen, we'll start with you, Michel. Did he play his cards right? Did Belanti play his cards right by playing that up? Because technically, he didn't do anything wrong.
Technically, you're right, but I mean, you do have to look at the when you look
The
at the
unwritten
replay,
rules.
it doesn't make any sense. I mean, to see a guy being hit like, okay, after the break, this I agree, but otherwise, I mean, it didn't make any sense. The way it ended up, no way.
Pierre?
Pure comedy.
From my vantage point, it was the weirdest of feelings. We literally had to back up and watch it on the big screen because we didn't know what happened. I was literally watching from ringside, and I did not know what was going on because it didn't seem like it was that. It didn't seem like a significant punch. And then to see the aftershock and the people looking in the crowd, wondering what's going on. I don't know how it came off on TV, but us being there, it felt really
Listen,
eerie.
I feel like a jab would have been more powerful than that punch. I mean, he
It
didn't
was literally
come in with
nothing. He
any
literally
power
pushed,
at all. Really, to go down like that, you start to ask yourself questions. This guy's supposed to be on the main card fighting Butte, and then after that, he ends up taking the fight against Jean-Pascal. And then this happens in the second round, and you hear his manager say, "Stay down." I mean, hey, I'm not a big
Right,
person
but they
about
can
controversy,
spin
come
that,
on.
right? They can spin that if ever he's asked about. And that's going to come out over the next couple of days.
Yeah.
It's going to come out to say, why did you tell him to stay down? He'll come back and say, look, I can't take any precautions.
That's it
I
for
have
the
to protect
safety
my
of my
fighters for the
boxers."
safety of my fighters. The idea more is if it
Listen.
was really interesting. I got to watch the feed from a different country, out of England, and we got to pick up a lot. The viewer got to listen to a lot of what was being said on the mics. And one of the things that one of his cornermen, I won't mention who it was, said this guy came here for a disqualification. This is what they do, is what he was mentioning to a certain class of fighters. Do you believe that that's what happened? He sees an opportunity, he saw an opening, makes his money, and is on his way out.
The check's already cashed at the bank. When he felt the first body shot and then the second one, you can tell in his face that he wanted out of the fight.
Yeah.
Now, do I think that he took a dive? In the history of boxing, it's happened before, but in that particular case, we don't know. We literally don't know what happened. And for me being there, it was very weird.
There's the unwritten rule we talk about. Would a Hilton or Ouellette do that? Would they
No,
say-
I don't think
they
so.
would-
No, not at all. Not at all.
Of course not.
But-
They would want to go 16 rounds if they could,
But
right?
one must know that he was brought up here for a special purpose. I mean, you don't bring up a top boxer to fight Jean-Pascal or Butte. And I think there's a little drama, of course, but one must realize the role that this guy had going in the ring.
He was the the tune-up before the
Quote-unquote
Kovalev
punching
fight,
bag.
which is going to be now maybe in jeopardy. Coming out with the outcome of this, if it's a disqualification, I mean, it's still going to be reviewed by the boxing board. I don't like the fact that he went down. And you'd think in the 21st century, boxers wouldn't take dives, but this kind of looks like a dive.
Anybody surprised that they called it a unintentional foul? How is it an unintentional foul if you hit the guy after you break from the clinch and the guy says break?
All the time.
Well, from the post-fight press conference, Jean-Pascal claimed that he didn't hear the break.
Yeah.
And from the noise that us being there, there's a lot of noise. It could have easily drawn the referee. And Michael Griffin's a noted referee. You could tell by his reaction he didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, when he turned around, he looked a little lost. He didn't understand why he was on the ground.
Yeah, he looked directly at the commission. The commission looked directly right back at him, and they were looking at Belant on the floor.
That's it.
And they didn't know what was going on.
You brought an important point, indeed. Griffin is one of the top in the business.
Russ Amber alluded to that at the press conference.
I mean, it clearly indicated, I think, that there was a break in the action.
Yeah.
And Pascal went at it, but was it that hard of a blow?
No, it's like Roy Jones said. You can't punch them when they're down. You can't punch them when they're up. When can you punch them?
Yeah, when you take a look at the trauma specialists, and very often in these types of events, and I've seen them happen before, the trauma specialist's job is to overlook the paramedic and trainers, right? To make sure that that's isolated and the trauma's been taken care of. If you take a look at the footage, you would see that the trauma specialists leave the ring. That never happens. And the only thing that it indicates to me is that either A, they made a gut shot with regards to what they were seeing visually, and were able to see enough visually to say, you know what, this guy's fine, right? And the only two guys that were left in that ring was a trainer and the paramedics. It's one of those things with boxing that you get to see very often, whether it's scoring, whether it's these black eyes. Do you believe that this is one of the reasons why boxing is not moving forward as popular as it once was, and why MMA, for example, is taking the front seat with regards to combat sports?
I think they should unify all these, the World Boxing Council, Union, they've got what, four organizations?
Four organizations, but there's too much money in the way.
That's it, but
there's too much money in the way.
Just one, so we can figure out exactly who's doing what, where, how.
Ideally, that would be the best thing to do. But there's so many promoters, the people that they don't want people to get in their pockets, and it's very unfortunate for boxing. Yeah, exactly.
One thing's for sure is you have unified us right here on Reid Between the Lines. We're so happy to have you on the show. For people who want to catch some of the action, of course, we know that you're at the Bell Center, but where else can they catch you?
RDS, along with Kello Blanchard, have been doing golf for the PGA Tour for the last, let's say 25 years or so. So we're getting ready for a brand new season, upcoming season on the PGA Tour with a new Canadian kid. Have a look, Nick Taylor.
We'll hold that one for the next time we have it. We want to talk a little bit of golf. I know you're passionate about it. Thanks for taking the time. Great to see you.
Really nice. Thank you.
And I'm getting confused. I'm getting confused about boxing because it's getting like American football. You can't hit a man when he's up. You can't hit a man when he's down. What the hell is going on? When are we going to be able to hit a man?
Well, you should follow Canadian football. Everything goes.
I guess so.
Stay with us after the break. My face-off is next. You don't want to miss it. He's the host of What in the World on SiriusXM. It's great to be able to face off against none other than the very vocal and opinionated Richard Gardner. Richard, thanks for taking the time for doing the show out there in Toronto. Toronto, as they say.
How are you, Adam?
Good. Thanks for being on the show. You're an ex-Montrealer. First and foremost, how is it to be living in an area where people are cheering on the Leafs?
Well, it's going on 20 years now that I've been in Toronto, and it's been everything. I guess it's been amusing at times, depending on your stance. I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a part of me at times that enjoys the Leafs up and down roller coaster of emotions here, especially with the fans. But mostly that's because I resent the organization, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, as much as I do, and I think for good reason. But it is more fun being in the city when the Leafs are in the playoffs, but I think that's almost now a theoretical statement.
Well, let's talk about the Leafs. We talk about the organizational woes that they've had. It's been frustrating for a Leafs fan, especially the meltdown against Boston. In your mind, what's the biggest issue and challenge and obstacle that the Leafs have to overcome to finally see some success and give their fans what they deserve?
Capitalism. Capitalism would be the biggest obstacle, and that started long before the salary cap era actually gave this organization an out, where they could actually claim that they would love to spend $200 million a year, but they can't now. But Really, this started when MLSE figured out that the brand, the Leafs brand, was as strong as it was, and that essentially it's crack cocaine in this city. When you know that you don't have to do anything, in this case, put a winning product on the ice to fill a building with the most expensive tickets in the league, in sports almost, and you're valued every year by Forbes magazine as the the most valuable franchise in hockey. Well, you're not obviously incentivized to do much more, especially if it involves spending more money to get to the top of the mountain. That doesn't necessarily appease the fans, but these fans essentially suffer from Stockholm syndrome in this city, that they've somehow, fallen in love or identified with their captors.
Well, obviously Brendan Shanahan is a big part of that. You talk about so many different levels. There is a little bit of blame with regards to the organization. There could be a little bit of blame on the fans themselves, depending on how you see it. But for sure, someone who's going to eat the brunt of that is going to be Brendan Shanahan. What do you think of his position? What do you think of what he's done? And is he the right fit?
Well, the odd thing is, on the other side of the organization that we were just talking about, let's say it was somebody coming in to sell condos with the Leafs brand or expand their ancillary revenue. They wouldn't, if they did a search for, let's say, that CEO or president position, I can guarantee you the person who would have gotten the job would not have been coming to the table with no qualifications at this level. It became a bit trendy recently. Obviously, Joe Sakic in Colorado, Cam Neely in Boston, where there was some success there, and now obviously Trevor Linden in Vancouver. We know how sports is, right? Everybody sort of waits for somebody to finally step outside of the box, and then everybody else follows. This is the trend right now, that you go out and get a former player with a lot of cachet, a lot of profile in the community, and you let them steer the ship. To this point, Cam Neely in Boston is probably the best example of success, but Brendan Shanahan is not a guy that's well-liked necessarily as much as you would think. The public likes Brendan Shanahan. He's not as respected in the league for some reasons that we could talk about on another show. But at the very least, right now, he's learning on the job. That's undeniable. And I don't think the fans here necessarily deserve to wait another 3 to 5 years to get a winner on the ice.
Before we let you go, we're going to have some fun with you on our rapid fire segment. I'm going to throw a couple of questions out there with you, and you just go ahead and give me your first thought that comes to mind. You ready to go?
That's dangerous.
All right, so here we go. What would be the first trade you would make for the Leafs?
Dion Phaneuf. He has to go.
Well, that leads right into my next question. As a defenseman, where do you rank from 1 to 10? Dion Phaneuf?
6.
Most surprised NHL team this season for you?
Calgary Flames.
PK Subban or Drew Doughty?
I think PK Subban, because he works on his crafts. Doughty's got to hit the gym.
Is Yaroslav Halak for real?
Oh, wow, man. Thought he was done. And how ironic he gets resurrected in of all places, Long Island.
And last but not least, one word to describe Jean Beliveau.
Class.
Well, it's classy to have you on. Thanks for taking the time, Richard Gardner. We'll be in touch soon.
Good stuff, Adam. Thanks, man.
Thanks. Stay with us. My rant is up next. You don't want to go anywhere. This week, in honor of something special and important to us, we've substituted our weekly rant to take a moment to reflect. We'd like to take the time to pay our respects and thank the late and great Mr. Jean Beliveau. Mr. Beliveau affected us all in the city of Montreal. He was a great man, a leader, a legend. Le Gros Bill was more than just a hockey player. He was a father figure to so many children in Montreal and across the hockey spectrum. Statistically speaking, if we take a second to look at his long list of on-ice accomplishments, it's ridiculous, incredibly impressive, a true champion. The name Jean Beliveau is engraved on the Stanley Cup a grand total of 17 times. That's right, 17. 10 as a player, 7 as an executive, which by the way still stands as a record in his 18-year career. He missed the Stanley Cup playoffs how many times? Once. You can also add 13 All-Star games and 10 seasons as a team captain. He owns the record for the most goals in one Stanley Cup final with 7, has 9 all-time game-winning goals in the finals, and his first overtime playoff goal was versus the Boston in double overtime in the semifinals. On his 6th Cup tour, he won the inaugural Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP, and frankly, the trophy should be renamed after him. After one of the most impressive feats, Béliveau is the NHL all-time leading Stanley Cup Finals point scorer with 62 points in 64 games. Try and wrap your head around the thought of a current player skating in 64 final games before they retire. It's truly incredible. And what's even more impressive is the type of person he was. Béliveau wasn't the loudest in the room or the most talkative, but there was just this aura about him that proclaimed confidence, and it was contagious. It made everybody around him believe that anything was possible. The way he identified himself with the public and the way he wanted what was best for the world around him is a rare and admirable trait for such a high-profile star. For a man with such accolades, the fact that the immediate reaction to his passing was all about the person he won speaks volumes. Let's take a moment to pay tribute to a great man. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Adam Reid. Thanks for being with us.